welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose. You can find me at Thundergrunt Bob on all the dumb social medias that I have no clue what they are named anymore. And the other guys are going to introduce themselves right now.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. You can find me on Twitter or Twitter X, whatever. X at Jimmy R. George. It's not X or Jimmy R. George. It's just at Jimmy R. George. People have abandoned Threads already, but I'm on Threads a little bit. It's at _ Jimmy George. And yeah.
Jamie?
I'm Jamie Nash. I'm a screenwriter and the writer of 2 books that you should pick up right now and put in your Amazon. Pause this podcast. One's the Save the Cat Writes for TV, and the other is Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. Go buy them right now. And I'm on, my Twitter is Jamie_Nash. If Zuckerberg beats Elon Musk in the battle in the Coliseum, I will switch full-time to Threads, but not until then.
So it's all dependent on who wins the fight. I got it. That's a good metric. Yeah, that's a good
how
metric. Jamie.
Everybody should base which one they use.
Where's the claymation?
I feel like when that happens, Jamie, we need to do Idiocracy on the podcast. just the parallels of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we're talking today about Barbie, a movie that obviously is pretty popular. And before we get into our talking points, we're going to go around and talk about our own reaction to the movie. This is the first time in a while we've actually done a movie that's fresh, still in theaters. We kind of avoided doing that for a while.
Last time was Nope.
So it's been a while since we've done in theater. Like fresh. We usually wait for VOD. So yeah, let's go around and I don't know who wants to go first. Talk about how their reaction from Barbie. Jamie, go ahead.
Sure. Mine's pretty quick with this one. I really liked it, like to the point where I can't think of the last kind of blockbuster movie. It's weird that this is a blockbuster because it is a strange blockbuster in some ways, but I can't really think of the last one that I'd say would beat it in the last year or something for me. I mean, I think it's better than, I don't know, for me personally, Top Gun Maverick or Avatar or some of these other movies I've seen. I like this one better. So, yeah, that's where I'm very high on it. I think it was super clever, super surprising, but also easy to watch and not too long. It wasn't like 3 hours, which I know I appreciate these days.
Your bladder liked it. Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate that it wasn't the 3.5 hour Barbie movie. So I'm very positive on it.
Awesome, Jimmy, sorry. You guys, your names, I knew I get it.
I'll go twice.
Yeah, Jamie, just say it again.
I like this movie. It's my favorite. No.
So first of all, it's really awesome to go to the movies and for it to be crowded. Yeah. I know some people would prefer like to be the only people in the theater, but I don't know, I tried to see this a few days ago. So for anyone listening, like years from now, the movie's been out for 3 weeks. So for context. And so I went on a Wednesday to try to get tickets at like 3:00 for an 8:00 showing. And it was sold out.
Like during work hours. That's nuts.
Yeah, I went at 3:00 to get tickets for 5 hours from now on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after, and the screening was sold out. Like, that hasn't happened in a long time. And I think it's awesome, especially with what the movie is about, that this movie is a hit. And I love the movie. I think it takes a lot of big creative swings that are really hard to teach, which is going to be hard to talk about, that I'm really surprised they allowed, and yeah, we're not really getting into theme on the talking points, but there's a great quote that I don't remember where I heard it from about like theme at its most basic state, like when you're trying to come up with ideas for your movie and what's the theme One way to think about theme is, I know something that you don't know about living in this world, and I'm going to use this movie to tell you and help you understand what I know. And I feel like this movie is like one long exercise in that, about how the patriarchy impacts women. And so, you know, when the movie was over, I was like, it's going to be tough for me, Bob, and Jamie, 3 white guys, 40-year-old white guys, to talk about this, like in the past certain other movies. But I'm really glad that we are. I'm really glad that we are talking about it, even though I can recognize that.
Yeah.
So
we've always tried to admit it when we're like, hey, we're 3 middle-aged white guys.
Yes.
Like, yeah. And just to add on to your point, Jimmy, I've seen it twice, and like I saw it at the Senator, and I went at times when, if I went to other movies at those times recently, it would be completely empty. But both times I saw it, it was in the side theater, completely packed. Like it's sold out. I'm like at a time when it shouldn't be. I'm just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was
awesome.
Yeah, I know, it was great, and the audience reactions to this movie is really fun.
By the way, I saw it at 12:30, and there were about 10 people.
Okay, well, Jamie ruined our theory. No,
there you go.
Yeah,
no, it was probably, I saw it at my local AMC, and they probably had it playing in 3 or 4 screens at the same time. So I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Okay, so yeah, I loved it, but I figured instead of using my time to talk about it, like to go with what Jimmy was saying. Why am I forgetting your names today? To go with what Jimmy was saying, like, we are 3 middle-aged white guys. So I decided, instead of me talking about it, I would ask some of my friends who aren't like us, like, for their opinions. So I got 4 different reactions here, and I just asked a few of my friends. I was like, hey, could you give me 2 to 3 sentences on how you felt about the writing in Barbie, just to see what their reaction is, that so we could bounce off of it, or we could hear it, and that sets the tone, because we're going to talk more about the structure and stuff of the movie. I think these came out more as like theme and stuff, as you were talking, Jimmy. So, okay, I'm going to read these. First one is from my friend Meg. This is her words. The Barbie script was incredibly articulate, witty, funny, while also exposing audiences to feminist and patriarchal constructs. Although none of the Barbies have never actually experienced any suffering or inequality as women do in real life, the script does show to some degree the current difficulty of being a woman through the eyes of a mother and daughter. Good, right?
Yeah.
It's good. This is from my friend Chris. I think you talking about it as dudes is actually okay. They're responding to me saying, like, hey, because we're, you know what I mean? I was like, hey, we're kind of like three middle-aged white guys. Okay. I think you talking about it, dudes, is actually okay. The movie's message is that the patriarchy is bad for everyone. They can suffer from it too. They become parodies of what they think they have to be, and it makes them miserable. People say this movie is anti-man, but it's actually very kind to men by telling them in the end that they don't have to perform masculinity or what society thinks that is supposed to look like. Great, right? That's a great, I think that's, that. Yeah. This is from my friend Laura. What strikes me about the movie is the tenderness that Gerwig has for all her characters. How they all get to be vulnerable and make mistakes, and the film never judges them or asks that they have any grand resolution. Honestly, I love that everything ends on a note of ambiguity and discovery. And that is very synergistic with her other work, especially Lady Bird. I think the ending of Lady Bird is very open and about the thrill of finding oneself. The ending of Barbie does the same thing. I know it's co-written by Baumbach, but it has a very Gerwig sensibility in that way. It's great. I don't know if you guys have seen Lady Bird, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. It speaks to that one, speaks to some of the stuff we're gonna
talk about
later. Yeah, with her arc and what is it, and
it's even you know what strikes me is because I kept expecting like Will Ferrell's character to be the big bad, but he kind of comes in and he's kind of
he's
on
he's
board
a
and stuff.
he's an
he's open.
antagonist, but not evil. Like he's not evil.
Right.
He's just misguided.
Right.
Yeah.
Misguided by the
Right.
patriarchy.
By
Yes.
the patriarchy, right. Okay, I got one more. This is from my friend Megan. I think the thing I honestly appreciated most about the writing is that I felt the collaboration between Greta and Noah. Yes, it's a movie about women, but it's also a movie about how body image, imposter syndrome, anxiety, etc. are just as much of a trap for men as they are for women. A lesser movie would have made Ken a villain in an uncomplicated way. One of the most powerful moments for me is after the Kens first takeover and Gosling kicks Robbie out, when you have that moment of her realizing she's been doing this to him all along. Doesn't feel good, does it? That's his quote. And this movie has maybe the best ending line I've ever seen in my life. And finally, women are often infantilized in movies. Childlike dialogue, childlike understanding of the world, need to be protected by men, etc., which is an idea that's really weaponized in this movie. Yes, there is some childlike dialogue, but it's not because she isn't smart. It's because she's never been afraid, which is something that rings a really sad bell in me because I've been trained to be afraid since I was like 12. That's great, right? That's like what I wanted from
that's
Gas
insight
King.
that I
Right.
yeah,
That's I don't think the three of us would have said on this podcast, right? So, and I think that's very present in the movie. I
appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you to Megan, Laura, Chris, and Meg for your input on that.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, and for responding to me. I gave them like basically a day's notice. I had the idea last minute. So,
I mean, every one of those takes is like super strong, resonant, and hits some bells with me, like turns some heartstrings with me. So, well done from the group.
Yeah, no, thank you. Seriously, it's just I read them when I got sent them, and I was like, oh man, these are really good. So,
if I said to my friends, it would be like, I really like Ryan Gosling. He was cool. Yeah. So I'm kind of impressed by just how smart all those replies are. So kudos.
Thank you. Okay. So now let's get into our the guy's take on it. Who wrote this shit, Jamie?
This was written by Greta Gerwig. And is she married to Noah Baumbach, or are they just a couple? Okay.
No, I think they're married. Yeah.
I think they are. And we'll say, presumably, her husband, Noah Baumbach. And
is that how you say his last name? I always say Baumbach.
Is it different? Baumbach? I don't know.
I don't actually know.
And this movie has a little bit of development behind it, and it probably even predates the stuff on the net. It's it just in simple terms. You can say this really quick. It's not like a lengthy Indiana Jones kind of development process that it went through. But the first kind of thing in the mid 2010s, Diablo Cody actually rewrote a script somebody wrote, and she basically notoriously kind of was quoted as she just crapped the bed on it. She had no idea how to make a Barbie movie after a couple years. And then Amy Schumer came in. She was supposed to play Barbie, and the movie, her log line is sort of similar to this log line in some ways, except she's the one that doesn't fit in. It's almost like the one Barbie that doesn't fit in goes to the real world to figure, it's that kind of story.
And she's tired of Barbie Land's shtick, and she's
right. Like she's the one that doesn't fit in Barbie Land. So
she's weird.
It'd be like Midge's story.
Yeah,
it's sort of, yeah. Or a weird Barbie almost, but probably weird Barbie has her own confidence and stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Probably, so Amy Schumer's story was supposed to be like that. One thing I saw said it was kind of similar to the I Am Pretty themes and stuff like that. So maybe that's why she was going to the well too many times or something like that. So then after that, that's when when Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach took their, if that is how you pronounce his name, took their crack at this one. Noah's movies are like, I didn't IMDb him at the moment, but Squid and the Whale and all that
Squid and
kind
the
of
Whale
stuff,
is
right?
the one
Marriage
that
Story.
there's- Yeah. Ooh.
And Marriage Story, which I love Marriage Story actually. And Greta, it's funny because Lady Bird, which she wrote and directed, it's when I talk about mini plots in non-cheeseburger movies, so movies that are really good but maybe don't necessarily follow every single one of these screenwriting rules or bylines. Lady Bird is usually the one I put up there first. I'm like Lady Bird.
Oh, awesome.
And Noah's movies would be similar to that. Squid and the Whale isn't that. So they're people that are kind of on that more film as literature level or something like that. They're the Sundance movies, the Oscar movies, the things like that. Doesn't mean they're not great movies. Like I said, I love watching movies like that. I can't wait till their new movies come out. But a weird choice for like blockbuster filmmaking, which is why I think this movie is so cool, is because it does marry their sensibilities, their voice to this blockbuster thing. And I was kind of reminded in some way of James Gunn. Like it was kind of like when I know it's strange to say James Gunn for this.
He's indie from a different place though. Yeah.
He's an indie from a different place, but he maintains that sensibility in his blockbuster filmmaking. And the more James Gunn that's in his blockbusters, the more that marriage is, the better the movie, it seems. The more weirder it gets. And I think they get weirder in a different way. And I mean weird in a totally I love it kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better word than weird. So in some ways when I was watching, I was saying this works just like James Gunn works to me. This is real smart people with really strong voices, knowing that they're making like a movie for the masses and just kind of killing it by marrying their tastes with this other thing. And I think it works really well.
It's that rare thing where like they kind of prove that they could do the thing that nobody thought that they would do, right? Let me make a $1 billion comedy movie. Like you wouldn't expect that from them, from the Marriage Story guy and from the Lady Bird lady. You know what I mean?
It's so weird because you don't see it. They try to do this like from a I don't know, from almost a PR level all the time. Like not to bag on this because I think it's a good movie, but like Patty Jenkins on Wonder Woman, right? Patty Jenkins is an offbeat, filmmaker, and she has her own style and voice. But when I see Wonder Woman, it doesn't necessarily feel to me like the Patty Jenkins Wonder Woman. Like this movie feels like Greta Gerwig's Barbie. You know what I mean? And I'm sure maybe Patty Jenkins. I definitely am bagging on Patty Jenkins now because I think Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman was good, but then the second Wonder Woman, I don't know, maybe I don't know. That's the battle of trying to get a studio to bend to your whims when they're not really behind it. Maybe
we did that movie on the show too. If you want to hear that,
we did.
Yeah.
So
possibly a battle against the patriarchy. Very possibly.
Exactly. That's kind of my take. Like that's like it's hard to do what this Barbie movie does. It's hard because that's why this movie is so surprising and shocking. It's like Mattel let them do that, or whatever.
Yeah.
The studio let them do that. Really?
If you watch all the interviews with Greta Gerwig and just in general people involved in the movie, everyone says the same thing. I can't believe they let us make this movie. So that's like the sentiment going in, and that was all filmed before the $1 billion and everything. That was, so a lot of people are shocked, I think, that it got made in general.
I didn't get to say this in my introduction. I forgot I was going to say this. When I was watching it, the one thing that I kept feeling was if Bob Rose got to make a Barbie movie,
oh shit,
it would be as weird and wonderful as this. It kept reminding me of your work.
You.
I'm serious.
I really appreciate that, Jimmy. But I mean, I'm glad I wasn't doing it.
I think if Bob made the movie, it would feel more like if Daniels made this movie. That's what
okay.
I feel like.
There you go.
I see more eye to eye with that a little bit, but I will say this: like this for me, since I know I didn't review it at the beginning, but this for me did bring back a lot of stuff I loved about the 90s comedies.
Mm-hmm.
Like it reminded me of
Yep.
like the Brady Bunch movie or
Yes.
like was it, or just even Josie and the Pussycats. I know that's
Well,
2000s, but stuff like that, you know, like it just big swings and weird comedies that you never would think were coming, you know.
One of my talking points that I wrote down, because while I was watching, I was like, what is this movie like? And there are things that it's like plot wise, like Truman Show, which I thought of immediately. I was like, it's kind of like an innocent person, and the world is bigger, and they don't understand. And you know,
the world is false too. Yeah,
the world is false. So plot wise, it reminded me a lot of Truman Show. But I was like, that's not it, because Truman Show is a totally different tone, and it's not satirical in the same way. It's not like this, you know, because I was like, how do kids even watch this movie? Because it doesn't really make sense. You know what I mean? You almost have to have this thing where you're not trying to be literal with it. You're just like, okay, I get that this is like satirical and it doesn't have to all add up in some ways. And I was like, it's a weird kids movie. Kids do have a way to just run with it, but also kids can be very literal and ask a lot of questions. Like, how does she, where is the Barbie land? You know, blah, blah, blah. There is a sense that I could see kids like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's made for kids in some ways. I'm sure kids.
No, I don't think it is.
No, it like isn't because it's like feminism 101, as people have both said and criticized. But like kids, I think it's for them as they grow up with it. Like they'll be fans of it now, and they'll learn something important now, and then grow up with it and know that.
When I say kids, I really mean like 6-year-old girls who play with Barbies. Gotcha. You know what I mean? Or something like that. The real young ones that are like, oh, there's a Barbie movie, I want to see that. And I'm sure they love it just like I loved, you know, whatever action movie was when I was a kid that did the thing, but I didn't understand it.
I found out an interesting fact today too. Did you know that there are 43 animated full-length Barbie movies that were this? So this is actually like the 44th Barbie movie that exists.
What if I didn't know that she just like ripped off like pieces from each one and built it together?
Right. But I didn't know that. Like I didn't know that there were that many Barbie features that had been made for video.
My wife mentioned, because she saw it with me and she loved it, that it checks a lot of the same boxes. A movie with Tyra Banks called Life Size 2.
Yes.
It like it's about a doll. It's not quote unquote Barbie, but it's, you know, a parallel to Barbie, and she has to, you know, go to the real world and all that same. So check that out. My wife says it's awesome.
I've seen it. I've seen that movie.
so you know, the Truman Show and stuff like that were coming to mind. What's the
Matrix,
one where
Pinocchio?
What?
Oh,
yeah,
Matrix.
Matrix, totally. Even when Rhea Perlman showed up, I was like, I thought the spoon was going to come
Oracle.
out. Yeah, I was
I'm also not saying this because it's topical, but I think there's some of Pee-wee in there.
Yep.
There's like a lot of influence of Pee-wee.
I mean, there's two Will Ferrell movies that come to mind for me: Elf
and Lego Movie,
and Stranger Than Fiction.
Oh yeah, that too.
But so here's the one. So you're doing all the ones like Fish Out of Water, Going from a Weird World. What's the Amy Adams one too that she goes from fairy tale
Enchanted.
Great
Enchanted. All those kind of movies totally make sense. But the more I sat with it, I was like, well, what is it really though? Because all those are a little different. And to me, the ones I came up with were Wayne's World.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just
that's why I thought Bob, like the satiric.
There's like a real Mike Myers-ness to this movie. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, even the commercialism kind of stuff where they kind of wink at the camera or Helen Mirren mentioning something. It just there's a certain thing where you can't take anything too literal or serious.
You know how
have to sit back and watch it like a sketch with a big story or something. I don't know what to say.
It's also the tone. It's like the Mike Myers movies live in that weird middle ground between Naked Gun and like Hot Fuzz or something. You know what I mean? It's like there is like the fourth wall just doesn't exist, but it exists just enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like something like that tone. Right.
Austin Powers was the other one that came to mind. I was like,
definitely,
you don't really take the plot of Austin Powers serious. Anything can really happen at any time. It's making fun of a certain thing while it's also
a genre.
Doing its own thing. Yeah, it does. So those were the ones. it's funny because I was really struggling to figure out. I was like, what is this weird movie like? And those were the ones I ultimately settled on. I was like, yeah, it's kind of like that Michael Myers tone of,
So
especially Wayne's World.
I sent you guys. I know you guys didn't watch it, but I sent you that letterbox video of her like her influences, and Truman Show is on there, but like they're all her named influences for this movie are like from the 40s and the 60s. But that's the weird thing is that I walk away saying, man, this felt like the 90s to me. Like, it just felt like the 90s.
I think Pee-wee was on there too. Believe it or not. I think I saw that Pee-wee was on there. I took a list. I didn't watch the video, but I looked at the list of the like somebody did a breakdown of the movies, and some of the things. And I didn't watch the video. You can tell us. It seemed like more like 2001, and obviously the first scene was 2001,
right?
And Singing in the Rain, and there's stuff like that, like where you could almost see the direct influence on the musical numbers or things.
She was
like
also
that
talking about set design and
it's the how the movie is the story is told. Well, to your point, Bob, one thing that Jill pointed out that was like, she said she appreciated that she could tell that Greta Gerwig grew up in to your point, in the 90s era, Barbie era, right? So like a lot of the Barbie references and the Barbie world that you're seeing is leaning heavily into that 90s era Barbie. So that might have a lot to do with why it feels so 90s,
I have no knowledge of Barbie really, except I remember Skipper commercials. I think I remember, like, as far as the actual source material is concerned, I don't know about you.
I grew up with a sister, and my house was filled with Barbie Dream House, the Barbie Corvette, the Barbie.
I grew up. I have two sisters. My one sister was very into Barbies, like, but it was a different era when we like. Sad me, I didn't get all the Star Wars action figures. I had like 6 of them, and they never buy me the Snow Walker. You know what I mean? They never buy me the Millennium Falcon.
That's why you want to watch the world burn.
we never have like the Dream House, but we would have 2 Barbies and a Ken and a baby or something like that. But that was it.
Gotcha.
And somehow all my like Indiana Jones toys and stuff would get intermingled with Barbie.
Oh, always.
So,
yeah.
Like full-size Star Wars.
My G.I. Joes, I was playing with her, definitely.
Yeah, but
there's something to be said about how the G.I. Joe movies went down versus how the Barbie movie went down.
I know. Feel like that's and the Battleship movie.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I think we covered comparisons, right? Like that's what you meant by comps, right?
Yeah. That's all I meant. Yep.
I think let's talk about one of the most obvious things that I would have put on here if I were writing this point. Things that need fixing, right?
Yes.
We've talked about this before.
A million times.
Yeah.
Out of the 103 episodes, I bet like 60 episodes we
talk about this. Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and set this up, and then we can get right into it and bounce off of each other. So this comes from the first Save the Cat, Blake Snyder. And he theorized that in your arc plot Hollywood Cheeseburger, in the first act, you want to set up your character with things that need fixing, that over the course of the story we watch them work toward fixing, and these things can take place in subplots, they can take place in relationship storylines. All the little things that need fixing get addressed over the course of the story. What I think was interesting about this is the first part of the Before world, Ken is the one with all the things that need fixing.
Right?
Yeah. So these things that need fixing come in 6 common categories, and I'm gonna break down Ken's, and then I'll talk about Barbie. In Ken's Before world, it sucks for Ken, right? And so number 1 is changes in attractiveness, false beliefs, or personality. He has no personality whatsoever. Number 2, just specifically false beliefs. He believes he only exists to be an accessory to Barbie, right? He has no identity.
He is right. I mean, he's not just believing it. He is right at that point.
And it's a thing that we sense needs fixing, right? Number 3, strained personal relationships. He has tension with the other Kens. He's ignored by the other Barbies. Like, he has strained personal relationships with everyone in Barbie Land, including himself, really. Number 4, not being entrusted with the responsibility or not being able to handle responsibility. His only job is beach.
Right.
And he can't even articulate what that is. Number 5, being invisible to key people or seeking invisibility. He's invisible to Barbie, man. Like, it's so clear. That's like, it consumes him, how invisible he is to Barbie. And number 6, others don't believe in you or you've given up on yourself. No one believes in Ken. And later we learn, especially Mattel does not believe in Ken. We don't think about Ken ever.
It's like not even disbelief. It's almost they don't care. He's a non-entity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What I think is interesting, and then I'll go to Barbie's, is that Ken gets those things, but it's through the infection of his patriarchal programming. And then when he gets those things, which is not common in our arc plot story, usually when the character gets the things, it's a good thing. We're like, yay! Right. Ken gets all those things because of the patriarchy, and it turns the world upside down, and it makes him a horrible person, right? Or a horrible whatever he is. Yeah. So that's one thing that I think is very unconventional and probably has something to do with their, mini plot sensibilities. It allows them to pull that off. So the second one is Barbie's first before world, like the first setup. It's her life is a utopia. Like
it's perfect to a degree. It's almost scary.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to use the lyrics of the Lizzo song, which is a great example of how to use a gimmick to give us like insight that we wouldn't get without the gimmick. She says, P, pretty, I, intelligent, N, never sad, and K, cool. Like Barbie's world is amazing. She has no things that need fixing, from a doll's perspective. And it isn't until the catalyst, because usually when we're watching a movie, the catalyst comes in the midst of all these things that need fixing, right? We learn all of these things, and then we see the catalyst that's going to make them be forced to confront all of these problems and fix them over the course of the story. Here, she has no problems. Like, it's amazing. And then when the thoughts of death come, then her things that need fixing just keep piling up for like the entirety of the second half. So right. It's just interesting. I think it's very unconventional, like that the main character of our arc plot Barbie movie doesn't have any things that need fixing.
And her things that need fixing change. At first, the thing that needs fixing is she wants to go back to how it was, and then it becomes to be fixed, she has to become something more, right?
Different, yes.
Yeah, it's a different. It changes over the course of the movie. It's an
evolving list of things that need fixing. So even that is very different and very unconventional. Yeah,
right. It is kind of weird though, because when you're watching it, and I totally agree, like Ken's the one that has problems in his world. When you're watching it, even though her world is showed as a utopia and perfect and stuff, we also sense that, it's like watching robots and that that's not humanity. You know what I mean? It's like we sense there's things that need fixing, even if she doesn't know it or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's this weird existential tension because we know that people die.
Yeah, we know, but we're humans watching. We know that perfection is unattainable and not right. There's something inhuman about the Barbie world before she has that
tension. Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, there is an air of creepiness to it.
Yeah.
I think that's where the Pee-wee thing comes in. Like as happy and joyful as Pee-wee is, that movie's scary, right? Like there's something about Barbie Land that's like, I don't know.
It's almost like we dropped in on the land of Stepford Wives kind of thing or something. You know what I mean? And not that there were Stepford Wives, but
but I think there's an argument.
Everything is so perfect and nice and is without flaw. It's like,
But I think there's an argument to be made because that's not because of the patriarchy. Like they don't have to worry about any of the things because of the lack of patriarchy. They don't have to worry about any of the things that we do.
There's that too. And also, they're not humans. I think that's something
that's the big thing.
When you see a lot of people talking about this movie, especially like digging it apart, they talk about the Barbies and the Kens as though they were full-on humans when they're actually children's ideals.
Yeah, they're the hopes and dreams of
children and a brand.
Yeah.
So you have to, and I think that the writing knows that. I think the writers know that. I don't. Some of the people's reactions, they're like, they talk about it, I'm like, no, but he's a doll. Okay, she's a doll. You have to approach it like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the breakfast scenes?
Yeah, so I brought this up because I love hearing Jamie's spiel about the breakfast scene, and I thought we could bounce off of that. So, Jamie, you want to introduce the breakfast scene and what it is?
Yeah, the breakfast scene is something I wrote about in Save the Cat Writes for TV. And it's I watched a ton of pilots when I did that. And I found that like every other pilot I watched, the second scene was a breakfast scene. Like there was a teaser scene. Like in this one, it's kind of the 2001, thing. And that kind of grabs your attention. And then the next scene was somebody either waking up from bed or eating breakfast or something, or going through their morning routine.
Could it was be like, more perfect?
Yeah, it was like every other scene. And this one has a really fun breakfast scene. Now, it's weird because a lot of great movies and shows have breakfast scenes. And this one might have one of the more entertaining. I love the breakfast scene in this. I love the music and everything else through the breakfast scene and all the little gimmicks and gags they milked from the concept. Is great. But anyway, it's just something to point out. This one does have a breakfast scene. We're back in breakfast scene territory.
when we I consult on scripts 5 days a week. I read amateur scripts. I read people who are writing their first or second or third script. It's sort of the default laziest way to introduce a character, right? And
we've talked about the alarm clock shot,
the first
right?
instinct.
Yeah.
It's just
you start a movie with an alarm clock. I always
And-
roll my eyes when I see a short film starting with an alarm clock. I'm like, oh, because it just loses my faith in the movie instantly.
It's funny when I talk about this because especially when I'm talking to, for whatever reason, I can't tell you how many people I see just kind of turn white and they go, oh, because their next
they have a
they're about to,
breakfast scene.
their scene's the breakfast. Like I figured them out. Like I saw into their soul and ripped their heart out. And they're just like, oh, it's not, it's not the worst sin imaginable, but you don't know how many. It literally can be like every other thing you read has a breakfast scene as the second.
It doesn't mean it's just bad though.
No, and so that why
it doesn't. Yeah,
car chases happen in lots of movies. Some of them are good, some of them are bad.
It's a trope.
It's a trope. Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring it up and the premise delivery, we don't even have whiteboard on the talking points, but the whiteboard for this movie is incredible.
Yeah,
and
totally.
This might be one of the best whiteboard movies we have ever done in some ways.
I know. I debated if it would just be the whiteboard and we'd just talk about that because we could spend 2 hours talking about the whiteboard.
It's so good, yeah.
And to explain to somebody who's might never heard our show before, we think of the whiteboard as your brainstorming sessions to get to the ideas and why they're special, the people, places, things, scenarios, and dialogue that like express your movie specifically. But the reason I brought this up is because I think this is an example of how you can subvert the trope, right? If you can find a way to make the breakfast scene subversive and do something like meaningful with it, then there's value in using the breakfast scene, right? And like what I love about this is that they give us two breakfast scenes back to back to kind of show us how Barbie's world is instantly turned upside down by the unexplainable thoughts of death. And they even use the song. So the Lizzo song is not on the Barbie album, but I found it out there. She released it to the public because everybody was like, where's the gloomy Bad Day Barbie song?
Right.
So she released it to the public, and here are the lyrics while she's waking up after having her first thoughts of death. So the first time around, the waffles were a perfect heart, and whipped cream just flew, on its own and plopped right in the middle of the heart.
Yeah.
Her imaginary shower with imaginary water was perfectly warm. Her outfit was perfect. Everything was perfect. And they used the lyrics of the song in those first perfect breakfast moments. And they give us, the opposite of those. She says, hey, Barbie, why so stressed? Could it be those irrepressible thoughts of death? And then she has the bad breath for the first time in her existence. The imaginary shower is cold, and even Lizla says, "Oh, that's cold." And then the imaginary waffle is burned. The imaginary milk is spoiled. And then even they use the lyrics of the song and reverse them. P, panic. I, I'm scared. N, nauseous. K, death. So I just thought it was like really clever way to take that trope. And we talk a lot on this show about how tropes are your friend. Tropes are the way to be subversive because everybody knows the breakfast scene.
I was going to say with comedy, they are such your friend. That's the point. That is the point. Yeah.
So those breakfast scenes are very instructive on how to take any trope and use it with the premise to make something awesome like this. So yeah, got Jamie's breakfast scene spiel.
and we squeezed in whiteboards just in the middle there. Just a little.
That's our show premise delivery.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the why now.
Yeah, this is another one I kind of could feel it, but before Jamie introduced the concept of a double bump catalyst, I had never heard of that. And then now I notice it a lot in movies. And I think this one is a good example of it. So I'll explain the why now. And then Jamie, you want to bounce off of me and explain the double bump catalyst and what that is?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. So the why now is basically comes from a David Mamet memo to his show on the Unit. And he suggested that every scene, he was trying to get his writers all on the same page, that every scene needs to have a why here and a why now. Why does this scene have to happen here in this setting specifically? And why does this scene have to happen now at this point in the story world's timeline? And answering those two questions gives the scene immediate urgency. Like it takes care of itself. And a lot of scripts, concepts don't have this too. And I found that this is a way to like bulletproof your concept. If you think of that on a wider scale, why does this inciting incident have to happen here? Why does this have to happen now?
It solves a lot of problems.
Yes.
It's over like an umbrella.
And we just talked about the Indy 4 one not having a solid why here, why now. And that's sort of like the big reason why the movie is so not as good as the others.
Yeah.
So anyway, so and then that's my spiel on the why now. But
you want to talk about the one in this movie? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the double bump catalyst is let's go over the catalyst first. So the catalyst is when you have the ordinary world. So Barbie's perfect world. The cool thing about Barbie is it's so obvious where what the ordinary world looks like, because it is that perfect world. It's the song. It's all that stuff. The catalyst is the first hint of some change in that ordinary world that will lead to the story that we're going to tell. So in this case, Barbie's quest to kind of fix her problem. So a double bump catalyst is when it kind of requires two catalysts, two random events, two things that happen. It could be being struck by lightning. It could be a telegram. It could be meeting somebody. It could be a thought of death. It could be any of these things. But a double bump is when you need two things to kind of push it into the new world, to mess up the world. One of the most common examples I see when I read scripts consulting wise is it's kind of, is it Happy Gilmore that has, you need two things. You need the mortgage payment and you need hockey. It's like, you need two things. The mortgage payment makes them open their eyes to how can I do it? And then it's like, I can play hockey, I can play golf.
He was a hockey player.
He was a hockey player.
You're getting there.
You're getting there. I was letting you get there.
Yeah. So it needs both, because if it wasn't for the mortgage, then he would never look at playing golf. But then after the golf, there's a debate. Can I do this? Will I do this? Should I commit to it? All that kind of stuff, which then necessitates the break into two. So some movies need two kind of separate events, not always really tied together. Some stories have two events that are tied together, but then it's debatable whether those are just debate stuff. You know, like it's one thing happens and they kind of go, nah, and then another one happens and they go, you know, and they kind of think about it.
Jamie, just to keep with your Happy Gilmore thing, so the second bump in Happy Gilmore is when he can pay for the mortgage, but he decides to actually win the tournament to make his grandmother proud. Right? Is that what you're saying? You know what I mean? Like how the goal changes there?
The funny thing is, I don't really remember Happy Gilmore, but I
watched it last week.
Okay.
Bob is picking up the baton.
The only reason I bring it up is I see the foreclosure storyline in a lot of scripts I read, like, oh, they're out of money. But usually that's not the catalyst. It can be in certain stories, but usually it's the catalyst, and then an opportunity comes to fix it. But then there's some debate before they commit in the break into two to actually taking the course of action. And I always think that Happy Gilmore has I know it has a foreclosure, you know, storyline. So in my mind, I'm like, it probably is the same there, but I'd really have to go back and watch it.
Yeah, some of the episodes where we talked, Jamie, where we had good long discussions on this topic alone were Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, and the Mighty Ducks. I looked back to find it on the talking points. So those are the 3 episodes that we've talked about. So if anyone's interested and wonders how to use this, you can go back and look at those. But the reason that I brought it up here is I think this is a great, easy, as you said to Jamie, easy to understand and learn from and hopefully replicate double bump catalyst, which is the first one is Barbie has unexplained thoughts of death. And then the second one is when Ken accompanies Barbie to the real world, he gets infected by the patriarchy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so that completely changes his world. I mean, his character and then therefore their world. So both of those things need to happen for the story to have its engine and momentum. So it's a great, the first thing that I thought when it happened, I was like, oh, it's a double bump catalyst, because I'm a dork like that. Pointed at the screen.
Right. And everyone around you's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, that's like so clean too. That's the thing about this movie is it's so clean with these ideas. Yeah. 5-point finale.
Yeah,
we've talked about that a billion times. I know that.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring this up was I kind of have a new thing that I did a blog on, and I thought I might talk about it just really quickly here. There's this notion of the 5-point finale, and the 5-point finale is a strategy to writing your act 3, and it comes from Save the Cat. It's his third book, Blake's third book, Save the Cat Strikes Back. Actually documented it. He actually came up with it in the blog himself. And it basically says, hey, there's 5 points. Make sure you have these 5 points in your finale. And the points are, and I always do these from memory, so I apologize if I get the words a little wrong. But gathering the team is the first one. It's coming up with a plan. And we can actually, off the top of our heads, do these for Barbie. The funny thing about Barbie is because it's written by somebody that is a mini plot, not a cheeseburger person, it has all these, but they're a little weird. They're a little weird. Yeah. So in the gathering the team with Barbie, it's coming up with the plan, but then they actually mix with showing the plan, which we've seen in things like Mission Impossible and stuff before. Like first we'll do this, and then they actually show it. And
I think that's really hard to pull off, and they do it well.
Yeah,
good editing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all the Matchbox 20s. Well, I'm sorry. The first part is the gathering, it's the plan, but it's mixed with the execution of the plan, which is the Matchbox 20 and the diversion and all that stuff.
Play guitar at you.
Yeah. So it mixes a little bit into the beat, which is usually gathering the team is coming up with a plan, projecting it, talking about it, gearing up, putting on gathering the equipment, getting ready, all that stuff. The second part is the storm the castle beat. The storm the castle beat is the execution of the plan. So that's when they're actually doing the Matchbox 20. And by the way, these beats can be set pieces, or they can be many scenes, or they can be one scene. It really doesn't matter. That's what I always say with these. Like, however you skin this is up to you. It could be 5 little scenes. It can be one big scene. It can be a set piece, whatever it is. And in Barbie, it really is a few different set pieces. Like they kind of have a couple different spots.
Yeah, they're using all the things that the patriarchy deems as romantic, but women don't. and
to wake
as
up the team.
as the storming the castle. Yes.
Right. So the next one is a little hard to decipher in Barbie, where it's usually very easy to decipher in most movies, and it's the most important one, and that's the Hightower surprise. So the plan, that things don't go according to plan. Something weird happens with the plan. Now, in Barbie, the plan goes pretty smoothly. And honestly, when Will Ferrell showed up, like when I was watching, I was like, this is going to be the Hightower surprise. He's going to show up and say something. But he really just kind of goes along with it, right? He's kind of like, they kind of convince him too. He's like, okay. And he's kind of
The
part
Ken
of the thing.
musical thing where they all sort of, the Kens end up getting along, I think is,
Well, that's a surprise because they're fighting, and then they start getting along. Like they start forgetting,
but they still able
the patriarchy,
right?
know?
But they're still able to take back the Constitution, the Supreme Court and the Constitution.
But the Kens working together after that.
Plan. Yeah, it doesn't really screw up their plan at all. It kind of everything goes their way in some ways. I don't really feel like there's a lot of conflict or anything up until I actually think what I pegged, and again, not really a perfect example. It usually would be Will Ferrell. He'd come in, we didn't expect this guy, and then something would happen. She doesn't go that route at all. What I actually think is the Hightower surprise is they succeed in all these things glowingly, but for some reason Barbie is still not right. She doesn't
have her ending.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And then she needs to dig down deep, which is the next beat, which kind of reflects on the journey and shows how she's changed and come up with a new plan. And that plan is to become human. So that's the Rhea Perlman of it all. That's how I peg the 5-point finale in here.
No, that's
your
what
mileage may vary. But by the way, when I talk 5-point finales, when I talk Save the Cat, I'm always like, these are strategies. So if they don't work in your favorite movie, that's fine. They used a different strategy. This is more if you're a writer and you need to come up with something and you don't know where to go, try this 5-point finale strategy. It might work for you. It shows up in a lot of movies, and you can vary it to your own degree. But to that point, I suggest 5-point finales, and I actually said this once on the podcast, and then I blogged about it because I had to think it out a little bit. I think 5-point finales sort of work in the fun and games, but they kind of have some minor adjustments. And
can you explain for people? Can you explain the fun and games a little bit? I know we talked about it before.
No, that's a great point. So the fun and games beat in the Save the Cat story, it's a Save the Cat term, but it works in any kind of model you use, even if you don't use Save the Cat. So the very beginning of Act 2 is basically your logline in motion. So when I say that, if Barbie's, and I didn't do a logline for Barbie, but I can kind of make one up. After an existential crisis, Barbie has to travel to the real world to find the girl who used to play with the Barbie that doesn't like it, something like that, right? She's on a quest to find the girl who, started having these existential crises herself, so she can kind of bring things back in the fold and whatever, cure the universe. That is what the Fun and Games is all about. That's the beginning of Act 2. It's Fun and Games because that's kind of the movie you're pitched in the trailer. That's what they tell you. This movie's about this. So Fun and Games, it's that movie. And a lot of people have trouble with the Fun and Games writing it because it's the longest beat in a Save the Cat beat sheet, except maybe the finale, which has the 5-point finale. That's why it has it. So it's like 25, 30 pages long, something like that. It's kind of the heart of your movie. It's the trailer moments. It's the story people come to see. But a lot of writers write a montage and think they're done. They're
one
like,
page.
One page. And they don't know. They're like, they'll come back to somebody like me or Jimmy and they'll be like, yeah, I only got about 10 pages out of that, or 5 pages or 1 page or 2 pages. And they need another 15. And they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't really know. And my suggestion to kind of brainstorming it is twofold. One is it's really as simple as looking at your log line. If your log line is well constructed, it's a hero with a plan, and there's an obstacle in the way. So that tells you what the Fun and Games of Barbie should be. Barbie's on a quest in the real world, and the obstacle is the real world in order to find the things. So this should be the time. Go for it.
Just like Elf. just like Elf.
Just
It's
like
exact.
Elf. Just like Elf.
It's her living in the real world and reacting to the fish out of water story, right? That's what you came to see.
Yeah. Absolutely. And because of that, I think you can kind of tackle it in the same way the 5-point finale does, except you just can't have the big resolution that the 5-point finale has. So I've kind of come up with my own 5-point fun and games, which is gathering the team. And gathering the team might just be the beginning of that, before you set out and have the plan. So Barbie has a plan. What's the plan? I think the gathering of the team, you could look at it as Ken and the transition to get there and all that stuff.
The vehicles, like the Barbie vehicles.
The vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So whatever that thing is, that could be the gathering of the team in the Barbie case. Executing the plan. Their feet are on the ground in LA and they're looking around and we're having all those whiteboard moments, whether it's people looking at them funny or them realizing the world's different. All those
Barbie
fish out
feeling
of water
fear
moments.
for the first time. Yeah.
Fear for the first time. The construction workers, all that stuff. All that stuff that happens. But at its heart, Barbie is trying to execute her plan. She's trying to find where this girl is. Now, the next beat in the 5-point finale is the Hightower surprise. I call this the plan roadblock. I get a little softer with mine, though I think it is usually a surprise twist or some kind of setback that happens. And it's debatable because, again, I don't know what strategy they use for Barbie. I'm just using it as an example for you who might use the same strategy. Because Barbie does get a little weird in some ways. You could say that they just can't find her. So when she closes her eyes, that could be the midpoint. I pegged it more at when she finally gets there, she realizes it's not the girl. When she gets to the school and finally confronts the girl, her plan actually works. And the girl kind of says, we hate Barbie, we never play with them and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a major twist in the fun and games. The whole plan up to that point was find the girl. She finds the girl and she's like, wow, this is harder than I thought. This isn't going to work as easy as I thought. This is going to be much harder.
She's also at that point learning that everything she thought she was wrong.
Right.
In the beginning of the movie,
having
they set it up
major identity.
She thought she solved, she solved feminism, and then she finds out she didn't. That's huge.
And I feel like this beat can be, if your strategy wants it, almost like a mini all is lost kind of beat. It's like then they go to now what? And they're like kind of wallowing in some ways, like, oh, what do I do now? And my plan's not working. I failed, and blah blah blah.
Right.
Again, in this movie, it gets a little weird because then Will Ferrell kind of comes and sweeps her away for a little bit, but it's almost like a double roadblock. It's like
double Hightower surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's some wallowing there, and then she has to come up with a second plan, and that plan either might culminate in the midpoint, lead to the midpoint, or actually be the midpoint at that point. And I think in this movie, it's a long midpoint in some ways. Like it's a big midpoint where she realizes, what's going on at Mattel and what she needs to do next. And I think the midpoint actually of this movie is when she finds out the mother was the one with the doll, but that kind of sets the next phase of the movie in motion. So anyway, this is a strategy, a 5-point strategy that if you're stuck on your fun and games, give it a try. Come up with the 5 points: gathering the team, the log line in action, that executing the plan, give them a surprise, give them some wallowing, come up with a new plan. And each of those beats don't have to be a scene. They could be set pieces. They could be multiple scenes. It's whatever you decide, but it might help you stretch out from 1 page to closer to 25 pages. And that's the goal with the 5-point fun and games.
I love that.
A new term.
5-point fun and games.
5-point fun and games. Let's talk. The next one, I feel like this is a huge talking point for this movie, is when society is the villain, putting faces on societal ill. I feel like this is where the reactions of the movie come from, because it seems that a lot of people have trouble knowing who the villain in this movie actually is.
Yes.
A lot of people have said it's like the men, or Ken's, but let's talk about it.
Yeah,
well, let's talk about that.
So first of all, I'll give some examples of famous movies
Yeah.
And Jamie, right? Nurse Ratched is a great example of this from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the classic, because that's an institutionalized movie, so it's really about the system they're in, and that's the villain, that's the problem.
She's the face of that.
You put Nurse Ratched in as the face of it. Yep.
Yeah, that's what's important. We need people to represent what the societal ill is in order to connect with it, and root for our characters to overcome them. So we talk about this a lot in the Legally Blonde episode and in A League of Their Own. So both, similar movies. But basically, I think it's pretty easy to understand that it's more the patriarchal ideals that are the villain, The patriarchy is...
It's not that easy to understand for some people.
So I made like a list of how it puts a face on those that I think explains it in a way that it's not the men themselves, right? Yeah. Will Ferrell and the Mattel board of directors, like you said, Bob, they're misguided by the patriarchal ideas, right? Like they're
not malicious, but they've been saturated in this world where they have no fear, and they don't even understand they have privilege. They're just kind of thinking they're doing the right thing. The road to hell paved with good intentions.
Right. There might be an argument that they have a comic obsession with how not misogynistic they are, right? Like
we're so not problematic. It's great. Right. Yeah. Right.
Why would you think that of us? Right. And then there's Act 2 Ken, which is the Ken that was infected with the real world patriarchal reprogramming. And that programming made him power hungry and disrespectful to all the other Ken and Barbies. It's the patriarchal programming. It's the infection, like America Ferrera, her character's name is Gloria, compared it to smallpox, right? It's like the smallpox infection. They had no defenses, and which I think is a great way to conceptualize it. And if you think of it that way, then the other Kens are also infected by the patriarchy. They weren't that way when we met them in the Utopia.
It's not their innate being. They're trying to do something, but it's not them.
They got reprogrammed, basically. Yeah. And they are also power hungry and disrespectful of each other, disrespectful of themselves, and especially disrespectful to the women and dehumanizing. And then my favorite way that it puts a face on the societal ill is through the other Barbies, which I think is unconventional because we don't really see the characters themselves reflecting, the societal ill back, which is like the other Barbies who we met before, and they all had unique identities and skills and passions and
Dr. President.
Yes, Dr. President, Supreme Court, you name it, prize-winning Nobel Prize winners. And now that they've been infected with the patriarchy, they've lost their identities, they've lost their autonomy voluntarily, and they're bending to the will of the Kens and like losing themselves, like allowing themselves to be dehumanized. It's very much like Get Out, right? Like just wake up, get out, So yeah. So I think this movie, if you have a story where ultimately you realize when you're going to brainstorm, society is the villain, and the wrong way that's happening in the society of your story world. A great way to then dramatize that is to create characters who reflect that and that throw obstacles in your way that reflect the societal ill that is the ultimate obstacle, which is Barbie's obstacle, is the patriarchy. So yeah. I just thought that this was another very easy to understand example that the movie does for screenwriting.
I've had two friends talk to me about the movie, and the thing that confused them the most was that Will Ferrell wasn't more malicious. I think it threw them off. They didn't that was their kind of complaint about the movie, is they were like, I don't understand why in the end he seemed like a good guy. And I'm just saying they read it like that.
Yeah, he's like the passive version of it. He's
right. like he's the patriarchy, but like the light version or something. It's like,
Aw.
he's got teeth, but he's cute, you know?
Yeah.
Like he might bite,
Yeah.
but he's cute. You
And
know,
I think
it's weird.
I think one of your emails, said how it's tender to all its characters. And I think, who was it? Was it Bill Maher recently said this movie is a man-hating movie and stuff. I didn't take it that way at all. I thought it was saying, look, there's this disease out there, and if you look at Barbie Land, it can be just as bad when they're all Barbies to Kens as it could be to what
Well,
and that's
it's
trying
a
to
gender
get you to
flip,
open your
right?
eyes. Yeah, it's a gender
The Kens
flip.
are the women of Barbie Land. That's the point.
Yeah, the only way it's mean to men is, in my opinion, is if you believe that's the only way to live or the best way to live is that way. And otherwise, I mean, yes, I see. Who wouldn't see the disease kind of, so to speak.
The people, the bad faith reviews are coming from guys that might actually believe those things.
Yeah,
that's the only way to live.
They're blind to the fact that they're Kens, basically. The patriarchal programmed Kens, the Act 2 Kens. Yes.
Yeah,
the Kens are not.
They're just Kens.
They're just Kens, right?
And the thing I appreciate about this movie too is it's not. And this is where it is kind of an adult movie in some ways. In a lot of ways, it's okay to be a little bit winky too, because like even when the arcs happen and everybody's happy, they're like, and then we'll be even on the Supreme Court too, and it's like, maybe not right away, or something like that. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's man-hating. It's just it's kind of like a stand-up comedian. I don't really consider a stand-up comic making a kind of darker joke that kind of has a little bit of undertone. It's like, so there's still
it
messy.
Rings true.
It rings true. Yeah, it rings true.
Like they're still a little messy and power hungry in their own weird sort of way. Like they don't trust the Kens, the Kens.
I mean, the movies,
or whatever.
It's not just the movies about
they
like
have good reason not to.
Right. Exactly.
It's not just like it's not just about like Barbie going from like becoming a childhood dream to becoming an actual woman. It's also like Barbie Land becoming a more palatable, real type of world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's gonna have flaws. That's the point. Is like it's gonna be a mess. And the Kens are gonna have to. It's gonna take time for them to become more equal members of society because you can't just do it in a day. So
right.
Yep.
Right. Is that everything we got about that? I feel like we covered that pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. Break into 3. Sometimes it's speeches. I think that's Jamie. It sounds like Jamie.
Yeah, this is me. So I talk about break into 3 a lot. And a lot of people get very confused by break into 3. There's another hard beat for people to understand. And this is a save the cat term. It's toward the end of the movie. There's usually this thing called the all is lost beat where the worst possible thing happens and somebody's kind of wallowing in sadness, like, oh, I failed. This is never going to work. The worst thing happens.
They admit that trope, and she says, "I am the lowest I've ever been physically and emotionally."
and she's rolling around on the ground like stiff as a Barbie doll, and all that stuff. So, in the break into 3 is usually something that gives hope. And that thing, very often in an action movie or something like that, it could be a clue, a piece of evidence, a new realization, aha moment about the plot. But also, in some movies, it's a pick-me-up speech. And this movie has one of the great speeches. And honestly, that speech kind of sort of elevates the movie almost to the next level at that point. And it's that America Ferrera speech, that kind of, and it's very much, I mean, the cheesy version of it is the Animal House speech, right? It's like the whole Animal House speech where he kind of picks everybody up and goes, this is a version of that's on a different level.
Or just several different sports movie speeches, right?
Several different sports movies.
Yeah.
And it brings everybody back up. And it kicks us into the third act where they want to act. Their agency is renewed. Instead of wallowing in the ground, now it's like, yeah, let's do this. And then it kicks into that thing we talked about. Let's make a plan. Let's gather the team. Let's make a plan for the the third act. And because this one was a speech was really why I wanted to highlight it, because I think most of the time it goes two ways. It's some plot revelation, it's some new development in the plot or piece of information in the plot, or it's something that raises spirits, like a speech, or, you know, somebody could have found a letter from mom or something like that too. You know, whatever that heartfelt thing is that kind of raises spirits and reminds them that, yes, this is hard, but there's a reason to do it, or something like that, or we're all in this together, or whatever it is.
In the specific case of this movie too, I think the speech kind of, all the Barbies don't get to go to the real world as far as the events of this movie are, and I feel like that's when the other Barbies get their at least taste of what stereotypical Barbie has experienced, and they start to understand what's happening better. Right. You know what I mean? Like, because they don't have the runtime can't.
In some ways, just living in the new Ken patriarchy. This is just almost like, hey, I see you.
Hear from a real woman.
Like yeah, exactly.
What you've done is valid. The fear you felt and the subjugation and all that.
Right.
Yeah. Before world, upside down world, and new world. I feel like we covered it a little bit.
Well, so I brought this up because in all our years of doing this, we haven't at a basic level explained these three concepts. And I run into a lot of clients when I'm speaking to the problems with their script, and I start referring to their upside down world, and I refer to their before world, ordinary world. They're confused as to what I'm talking about just at a very basic level. So then I have to take a step back and just explain what those are and give examples. And I think this one is really easy to understand for that concept. And also it does some interesting things with that concept that I kind of wanted to talk about with you guys just on that level too. So Jamie, do you mind explaining the three, and then we'll give examples together?
Yeah. So again, this is another save the cat term. And this one is this one, it can be confusing because upside down world means different things to different stories. Before world's it's the ordinary world. It's the breakfast scene. It's the going to work. It's the having the all girl party, whatever, all that stuff. That's the before world. That's the world they live in every day. And the upside down world is that act 2 fish out of water thing. And in a movie like this, it's very easy to see what that is. It's when they go to LA, and then actually when they come back to the new Ken version of the world.
There's two upside down worlds in this movie. That's what's fun and interesting. There's the real world is an upside down world, and then Barbie coming back and its Kendom is another upside down world.
Yeah. Yep. Honestly,
that's very unconventional.
You could also argue that once Kendom's over, it's also a different upside down world, right? like it never goes back, right?
Yeah. No, that's the new world part. It's
that's
kind of
the new world.
Okay, that's the new world. Sorry.
Yeah.
So what happens? So another way people talk about this is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So thesis is the ordinary world. Antithesis is the upside down world. Whatever, everything is different here. There's conflict everywhere for me because I'm not used to this world. The hero, I'm not used to this world, and everything is just like upside down. And then new world is melding the lessons they learned from the upside down world with the old world and coming up with a compromised world, which is synthesis. And that's kind of the idea here. And again, it means different things to different movies, because some movies really don't go to a different world. They stay in the same world. Like, Blake Snyder came from the world of 90s comedies. I don't know why. My favorite example is always Bruce Almighty when I think of those movies. But when you think of that ordinary world, the Fun and Games really just revisits that ordinary world now with godlike powers, right? That's the upside down.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to go through the same beats I just did. And it's kind of cool because you could do, I guess Barbie does this to an extent. You set things up in the ordinary world. Here's how they work in the ordinary world. You try them again in the upside down world, and then you don't necessarily have to revisit them in the new world, but it's kind of fun to play the ordinary world and what they look like then off of what they look like in the upside down world.
So I wanted to ask you guys I was going to save this for ARC, and maybe some of it I'll save for the ARC, but typically, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because maybe I am. Typically, in an arc plot Hollywood movie, the new world is a happier one, is a better one, is an improved one.
I was about to say the same thing before you started
movie,
talking.
I think the world is worse. The Barbie land is way worse, and I think that's interesting. And maybe
it's worse in from a certain aspect.
And we didn't even talk about. There's a second new world, which is Barbie as a human. You know, that's also. And again, is that a better existence? I don't know.
I think it's more authentic.
Well, she was a doll before. Now she's a person, so that can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, it can never go backwards. Right.
You know,
Pandora's box of her life.
And again, this might speak to like that thing I was saying, that there are things that need fixing even in a perfect world. Like they're living a robotic life, and once you're like Truman, and once Truman shows Truman, and once your eyes are open to the fact that the world's much bigger, that life is no longer as perfect and great as it is. It just doesn't make sense. Like you can't shut off the existential thoughts or anything like that. You know, it's a fake world. So in some ways it is a better world because we sense that perfect utopia isn't right. And I mean, this extends even to a little bit more, I'm tempted to say complicated movies. Not that this one isn't complicated. It actually is kind of complex.
No, I think this portion of it is very complicated.
Yeah, no,
yes. I like that.
I even have another aspect, but go ahead, Jamie.
But like Get Out is kind of not, you know, when you think, is his world worse or better than it was in the beginning? His world in the beginning maybe was better in some ways than his world in the end, but it's a compromise of the world he just kind of survived into his original safer world.
The awareness and you know, it forces it to be the way it is in the new world.
It's kind of like ignorance might be bliss, but is ignorance better? You know, for a human, and that's kind of what I think this one has a taste of in some ways.
To use your term, the second time I saw the movie, which I always enjoy a movie more the second time, the ending hit me as sad, and not because of the reason you said, Jimmy, because I think the imperfection is the goal, you know, to make Barbie Land more real. But what made me sad is that with all the movie's revelations and with Barbie, you know, becoming part of the real world, the actual real world, our world, doesn't get. We're stuck. We're still completely infected.
Dude,
with
the patriarchy wins. The patriarchy wins.
We're like the ending of the movie is kind of dark in that way. Is that we're just stuck how we are. There's no resolution, and I think there's a bigger like meta narrative there. Like the movie is trying to teach people about this stuff in the most basic way, hoping that maybe the smallest push forward can happen from this movie, but also the movie saying like, hey, you know, the world, our world, might be infected forever. We don't, you know what I mean? Like we just might be completely screwed forever. So there's a darkness to it.
That's why I asked. Yeah,
right. That's why I walked away the second time thinking that. I was like, oh yeah, we're fucked. You know, like we're completely fucked. Yeah.
Now, this is something, and I'm making this up as I go, so this might be the dumbest thing ever. Is there something to be said that this is kind of a criticism of Barbie? You know, this movie is kind of a criticism of Barbie, and the fact that Barbie Land has changed says the toy line has now changed. That it's not. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Like the toy line is now messy and more reflects a real world going forward in the future, so the world might be better in that way because
Will Ferrell agrees to make the real woman doll. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, something.
The ordinary woman,
the ordinary woman doll.
Barbie.
Yeah. So in a fictional world where Barbie changes and Barbie is this important to women or girls or whatever, now Barbie will be an ideal character going forward in that it's more realistic. I don't know. I might be making
it made our world slightly better. I guess that's true, Jamie. It makes our world slightly better from that vantage point in the context of the movie. Like Will Ferrell's executives make the ordinary Barbie, which gives, you know, a better representation there, and then, you know, for young girls, and that makes our world a little better. I guess I was being a little bit more pessimistic.
No, I felt what
Yeah.
you described. I felt both times I saw the movie. So
Okay.
yeah.
But my point is, because movies are how we wish the world would be.
Yeah.
And if I take this out, if I stretch this out a little bit, if the world were more realistic about their expectations of women from a young age, the world would be a better place. That's kind
Absolutely.
of that's the message I got.
That's there.
Yeah,
that's measurable. That's great.
So, and it's built into the Barbie line. But again, this is just me thinking out of my butt.
No, that's there.
No, I think that's totally there. That is absolutely there, and I think that's the reason Will Ferrell's character is in the movie, for that ending scene of him coming up with that idea or agreeing to that idea. You know, but the movie's not going to sit there and explain all that, everything you just said, Jamie. I mean, it just we had to talk about it to come to that. You know,
and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine.
It is,
but there's still a darkness
complex.
There's
a darkness. There's complexity. It's messy. You know, because it doesn't necessarily. You know, because what is it really saying? It's really saying, hey, it's not a perfect life. That's the realization. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, here's what it's really like. It's a struggle. It's this and it's that. And we should all embrace that. Or, you know, we should all understand, not embrace it, but understand it. So it's kind of like going like Barbie's thing, where she went from perfect to existential, you know, in some ways. It's like,
I mean,
you know,
it takes us into the next point perfectly too, because like, it's also the story of Barbie choosing death over perfection, authenticity over perfection, to be a human over perfect. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we're you know, like the next thing we're going to talk about is her arc, but like that's what the movie is, right? It's like an idea choosing to die eventually, to live in imperfection.
Yeah, that's heavy and kind of hard to connect with, because we aren't ideas. You know, we're people, but we are all used to being pushed to fit a check, a bunch of things on a list about what we're supposed to be, you know, ideals. We all have ideals placed on us that we're like striving.
I think the reason people make art and movies and stuff is so that we can write the ideals we think we are, or we wish we were, right? That Jamie kind of said that earlier.
Yeah,
but
the reason I asked this is because I do think it's messy, and I think that's okay. And I think that's one way.
What Barbie's arc is.
What Barbie's arc is, I think, is messy and hard to just immediately just point your finger like in a really spoon-fed way. For all the spoon feeding it does thematically, in the end, I can't remember. It might have been Meg. I can't remember which one of your friends articulated it, but the ambiguity, like the emotional ambiguity, is absolutely there and measurable in the end. And when we talk about our standard cheeseburger arcs, that's never the case, right? It's always very clearly they're in a better place, and it doesn't necessarily feel that way. It's more like they're in a more complicated place.
I feel like that what's great about this movie is, number one, what's absolutely great is that her and Ken do not ever end up together, and that's never a question. What's great about it, Jimmy, is I would say that it ends on a crossroads. It's like it's Castaway or something for Barbie, right? Like yes, you know, her life could be terrible. We don't know after this. It could be awful, but she has the choice now. You know, she has the options. She can do what she wants. She can go to the gynecologist. She can do whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like she's not saddled into this robotic routine, to use Jamie's words. You know, that's what's beautiful about it.
She says to Ken in that big moment, you know, there's a couple lines I wanted to point out and kind of try to figure out together what these things say. And then I'll go into my next point, which blends together with it, which is Barbie says, stereotypical Barbie says to weird Barbie, I never wanted anything to change. I'm ugly. Now I'm like you, ugly and unwanted. And then she's still stuck in her old way. That's part of the growing pains, where she's like, you know, expressing that pain. When she's hits her moment of grace, I think, Jamie, if I'm using the term correctly, when she says to Ken, you're not your house, You're not your job, which oddly reminded me of Fight Club.
It reminded me of Fight Club too.
The toxic masculinity.
I think Fight Club is actually a commentary on that, but it's been taken the wrong way.
I agree.
It's funny that Barbie kind of was paraphrasing it.
She was, it sounded very much like Tyler Durden's statement to his, but that moment of grace where she's like, you're not your house, you're not your job, and he has that big moment, Ken is me, and she has a moment, I am Barbie, you know, I'm not a
it's Barbie and it's Ken.
I'm not a checklist of ideals. I am, you know, my own entity that can be whatever I want to be. Yeah. So, and then those two things sort of speak to that change. But then there's another thing, which I'm not going to go heavy into the technique because we've talked about it a lot, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. But this movie, for all its unconventional stuff, has a very traditional old way, new way example, which is a really easy way to help the audience track how your character is growing and changing is to give your character basically the same choice twice. And the first time we see them, if it's not a tragedy, if it's like a traditional art plot drama, they go the wrong way, they make the wrong choice, and then the second time they have the chance to make the choice, they make the right choice, the right way. But the point is giving the audience that moment to see them twice with the same opportunity. So the first time, go ahead.
If you ask a character the same question at the beginning and the end, would they say the same thing? That's how we said it in the past.
It's Jamie's example. Yeah. It's Jamie. Jamie has put the before and after snapshot, the photo finish.
Right.
And that's how you make it filmable and measurable for the audience. For all us talking about how complicated it is, there is a very measurable, simple choice, which is when
if you asked if Barbie at the beginning of the movie, is your life perfect?
Yeah.
Right. Versus if you asked her the same question at the end.
Right. It's the sand. There's the even versus,
yeah. There's even that line in there where I can't remember exactly how it's said, but she talks about change, and she's like,
I'll get there. I got it. I got it. She says so the old way Barbie. The choice is she offers her the high heels or the brown sandals, the pink high heels or the sandals. And
Birkenstocks.
Birkenstocks. She's like, so what will it be then? You can go back to your regular life and forget all of this happened, or you can know the truth about the universe. The choice is yours now. And Barbie says, the first one, the high heel, right? She does.
Right.
And where Barbie's like, no, we're going to do a redo. You're supposed to want to know. And Barbie says, no, I don't want to know. You can make me forget now. She says, I'm not Venture Barbie. I'm stereotypical Barbie. I'm the Barbie you think of when somebody says, think of Barbie. That's me. So even though, and this is another interesting thing the movie does, which is she makes the wrong choice, but they force her to make the right choice anyway, which I think is really unconventional, right?
It's a parody of the Matrix.
Yes.
Like, on steroids,
She chooses the wrong pill, but they make her take the other pill anyway, which I think is really unconventional. And that is a way that if you have a story where you don't think your character is in a place where they are going to make that right choice so early on, because a lot of scripts I read, the character changes way too soon, and it throws off everything when they arc way too soon because the storyteller needs them to make that choice in order for the next things to happen and the story to go in motion. So here they came up with a great solution. Like, we need her to make that choice and go to the real world, but like, we can't have her make that choice.
I think that there is like another draft that has a messier joke where she does choose that and Weird Barbie lets her go back, and then her stuff starts getting worse.
Yeah, she gets cellulite in the Barbie land, right?
And she's like, okay. And then she goes back. She's like, give me the Birkenstock. Give me the Birkenstock.
Right. So they found a way. I bet you're right. A whole bunch of funny games.
What if Weird Barbie just forces her to choose this? That's the quick way to do it.
But then, in the end, they play with it. They don't give you the same exact thing, but they do. When she's with, I keep wanting to call her the Oracle. When she's with Ruth. When she's with Ruth and she asks to be a human, she says, I want to be part of the people that, this is Jamie, I think this is the line you were speaking about. I want to be part of the people that make meaning, not the thing that's made. I want to do the imagining. I don't want to just be the idea. And that's, that's the meaningful choice. Like, she wants to be human. And then when they show her, they don't show her taking the sandal, but when we see her walk out of the car, Glorio's car, in the real world, in the end, we see that it's a sandal. And my favorite part is it's a pink sandal. It's not brown. That's fucking great. That's so fun. But
it's got both aspects. She's flat-footed, but she's got some pink ones.
She's got the pink
synthesis.
Synthesis.
Right,
yes,
there you
Jamie.
go.
Even with and how do they express it? Premise specific, right? With the shoe, like, it's so perfect that she refused to wear when she was going the wrong way. So,
right.
Anyway, but like, I don't know what that arc says. I think it has something to. You were sort of circling around it without saying it, about change, right? Like, she was in a utopia, and utopias aren't real because nothing changes. Every day is perfect, and then she's resisting.
She's stuck.
Change. She's stuck, right? She doesn't know it. But like you said, Jamie, we sense it with that. There's that existential tension.
So in the beginning, she wants to return to the old world, and that's a very common thing for any character to do. They just want stasis.
Make it stop. Make it stop.
Yeah, they want that equilibrium. Something's been upset. They want to bring it back to the old way. Mm-hmm. She wants to turn it back, but in the end, she wants to go in a different way. She wants to move forward instead of backward. And that's like the ultimate arc. The thing I mentioned, there's even a quote, and it doesn't mean anything because I don't necessarily, but there's a part where the mother character says to her, "Yeah, that's life." When she's change, it's change, that's life, or something like that. She says something.
Gloria
in the middle.
says it to her. Yeah.
So it kind of shows you, even in the middle, she's like struggling. She doesn't want the change to happen, and then it starts to change slowly. And then, but in the end, she's chasing change. That is what she wants. She wants to create, not just live in the idea. And that's all about change. The question is, like, if we went and mapped that out, where are the learning moments for her that made it feel like she became somebody that wanted to become a human? I'd almost have to see it again to see if that does map. Maybe it doesn't even. Maybe it's just that she learned it over the experience. Maybe it doesn't have a bunch of check boxes. It's hard to say. But
I think there's so much that gets thrown in her face that's like situational agents of change that earn that desire to be more than an idea. Yeah, it feels earned.
The movie happens to her. If I could say it right.
I guess she sees good in the change too. You know what I mean? Because at the end, like, it's funny. This movie has so many moments. Sometimes when I watch a movie, like, I'm almost like high-fiving or getting almost emotional because I'm like, damn, a writer just came up with that line or something like that. And this movie had a bunch of those for me. I was just like, wow, that's awesome. But there's even a little moment where she's like, the speech was that way. And there even something like a pink Birkenstock sometimes gets me like that. I'm like, yeah, they did it.
It got me. The pink Birkenstock, I was like, that is so good. So clever.
Good. Yeah.
So specific.
I'm almost like they need me, but I'm almost like proud of them. I'm like, wow, they did a great job. But when they say, like, the line they said was like, maybe it can be, it's Barbie and it's Ken. You know what I mean? I was like, that's so good. And that tells me too that, like, she sees good in change at that point, so now she's kind of all embracing change. Like going back to the old way at this point would be going back to this poison system that now she's seen from both sides and knows how bad it is. So she doesn't want to go back to the old, but she wants to embrace the change and the new and making things better and coming up with new ideas and figure things out. Yeah. So it makes sense to me.
It's definitely measurable. Yeah.
And also accepting change is accepting that that they've been treating an entire section of their population as lesser. Like, to accept that is to change, right? Like, and that's kind of the hope that the movie has for us.
I think the strong reactions is getting from people who are resistant to that change show how impactful it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't done a deep dive into those, but I'm almost curious to now because I
didn't have the stomach to watch like 43 minutes of Ben Shapiro being a moron, but
right.
I can't do it. Even for the show, I couldn't do it. It's too much. Did you guys want to talk about nightmare fuel technique?
Yeah, I want to talk about it because, and I now that we've gone through all of this, and like, you know, deciphered that arc, I kind of wish I'd put this right before the arc, because I think this speaks to, once Jamie was talking about, are there those measurable growing pains? I think this speaks to maybe why it didn't need so many of those. So this is a technique that where this technique came from is I read a lot of scripts where basically everything is way too easy for the characters. Like, you know, they have their journey, and along the way, they have a couple bad things happen to them. And that's it. You know, they overcome a couple of nightmarish scenarios in 90 minutes, and it doesn't have that sense of resonating, you know, climax, because it was only a couple of things that they needed to overcome, right? And so what I often challenge people is to brainstorm, like, how you make a character grow and change is by facing them with like their worst nightmares and showing how a character responds to those nightmarish scenarios is showing the audience who they ultimately are. And forcing them to overcome those obstacles is forcing them to grow and change. And so, for instance, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, this works in comedies is my point. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is an example I use all the time because it's nightmare fuel for Steve Martin's character's fear of emotional connection and vulnerability. And every scene, they found a way to force him to be vulnerable, to make emotional connections with other people. And that's why over the course of the story, it feels so resonant. His character has such a journey. And so I just think this movie is a great example of how this idea works for comedies really well, because I think people are resistant to the idea of, well, worst nightmares, it's got to be a horror movie. It's like, no, like often putting your character's worst nightmares in their face can be hilarious, you know, like showing how so I wanted to use some examples. I'll just give 10 of how this movie gives Barbie her worst nightmares and why it feels like she's gone through such a journey. So first of all, thoughts of death. Second, the capacity to have nightmares and feel pain at all comes from that nightmare of thoughts of death, right? So she has had nothing but pleasant dreams her entire existence, and all of a sudden she's having nightmares.
I think they visually show it the second morning when she wakes up and she's like groggy because she didn't sleep well.
Right. You don't need to show her nightmare. You understand. You can feel that she had a bad
just like all of us,
just like humans. Yes.
Right.
The third, her appearance is changing. She has flat feet
and cellulite.
You know, she's gonna get cellulite. So that's 3. In the real world, she learns men are in control, women are disrespected, dehumanized, and threatened by men with violence. That's a nightmare. In the real world, she learns Barbies aren't beloved by girls, and many girls find Barbies degrading and offensive. That's another one of Barbie's worst
that might be her almost number one.
Maybe her Barbie Land's worst nightmare, right?
It's all a lie, right?
Yeah, it's all a lie. In the real world, Mattel can't be trusted. They actually want to imprison her and put her in a box, literally and figuratively. Barbie Land when she gets back, Barbie Land has been turned upside down into Kendom, and it's controlled by the Kens. This is a nightmare. Ken and the other Kens are power hungry because of patriarchy, and they seek to change the Barbie Land constitution and unseat all the Barbies from their positions of power. That's another one of Barbie Land's worst nightmares. Barbie's dream house has been turned into a lame Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa house. Another one of Barbie's worst nightmares. And Barbie's fellow Barbies, her friends, have all forgotten their identities and voluntarily lost their autonomy and bending to the will of Ken's because of patriarchy. So there you go. That's just 10. And there's way more throughout the movie. So I think this movie is a great example of how if you just make a list, once you understand who your character is, and you don't even have to have anything, you can have a blank story. You just go like, what are my character's worst nightmares? What are the nightmare scenarios? I bet you can block out, you can come up with like 10 scenes just off of that, and just keep building off of it. It forces character growth, and it forces them to make meaningful choices that they wouldn't have made when we first met them. So yeah.
Doing that technique with this movie with Ken would be interesting.
What's Ken's worst nightmares?
You know what I mean? Because it almost seems like it would be somewhat of an opposite.
He's
reaction.
getting all his wish fulfillment. So
yeah, he's getting
wish
getting
fulfillment. Yeah,
his dream fuel technique.
Yeah, it's wish fulfillment. Yeah. The tech,
yeah.
when I'm doing the opposite, Bob, I call it wish fulfillment. So it's a wish fulfillment.
Right.
You basically, like Jurassic Park, wish fulfillment is like getting to see dinosaurs, but that creates chaotic scenarios on itself. But like, you know,
Ken gets everything he wants, and it turns into a nightmare.
Yeah, and he even says like, it was hard being in charge. I didn't like it. You know, like. So yeah,
I wasn't even that into it when I found out that it was about horses.
So the wish fulfillment side of that works just as well, and how that creates situations that turn out to be bad, and also force your characters to make meaningful choices in the face of these wish fulfillments that end up to be the worst thing that could have happened. So yeah,
right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda today, guys. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Barbie before we depart?
Nope. I loved it.
No, yeah, it's a great movie. I know this is the first time we've been in theaters for a while with our things, but I was sad I couldn't get to see it a few more times before we did this. I actually want to see it more, but you know, it's really great.
Yeah.
Jamie, anything?
Nope. I think we've said enough.
We said enough.
Yeah.
Enough of men talking about this movie.
Yes.
Enough.
We're mansplaining.
Yeah. Let's mansplain Barbie to everybody for almost 2 hours. Do you guys have anything you wanted to plug or anything?
No, I'm good.
No, we good?
I have a class coming up. I mean, depending on when you listen to this podcast, if you listen to it now in August of 2023, I have a TV writing class coming up, and the groups are really small. I keep them really small intentionally in order to make it almost all hands-on, but it's a TV pilot writing class. So if you're interested in writing a TV pilot, if you have an idea, that's probably the best way to come into it. If you have a pretty good idea, or if you've kind of thought a little bit about it but haven't actually written it yet, it's a great class for that. And it's like a four session class, but it's over a 2-week period. But anyway, to find out more about it, go to savethecat.com. You'll see it. It's like Jamie Nash TV pilot class. I've taught it a couple times before. It's a lot of fun, and people come up with great ideas out of it.
Cool. Jimmy, you got anything?
No, I got nothing.
Oh, and I just want to say, I rarely talk about this on the show anymore, but anyone who is supporting me on Patreon, check your Patreon, because apparently something went wrong, and their payment system glitched or something. I haven't experienced it, but just check if you're helping out. Check all the Patreons that you're a member of, because
Bob's suddenly a millionaire. He's he's got a yacht. You know, he's all this crazy stuff's happening.
There's a glitch. It's like Office Space. I suddenly got like $3 million.
You know what? I will once again encourage listeners, if you have any questions about this, about craft in general, or if you have any suggestions of tools or techniques that we aren't talking about that you'd like to learn more about, we welcome them. And you can send us an email to writersblockbusterspodcast@gmail.com. We got 3 emails last month, and I was super jazzed about it. So yes, please give me a reason to check it.
Yeah, and also look, anyone who listened to this episode and wasn't a fan of Barbie, thanks for listening and being open to talking about it. That's something too. And also remember, there's plus 40 over 40 other Barbie movies you can watch. I still can't believe that. I didn't know that. I thought there were a lot of Air Bud movies. Apparently, there's a lot of Barbie movies. Okay. That's everything.
Yeah.
See you guys later.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.